What's good, America? It's your man, Reggie Florima, a.k.a. Big Flo. And back in the building is my co-host, Oliver Gibson, a.k.a. Oh, what's up, Oh?
What up, man? I'm back.
Man, you're back. Don't call it a comeback.
Don't call it a comeback. I got a little hairy for a minute, but I missed our conversations, and, we got the opportunity. You got the opportunity to have some big names while I was gone, but we got a big name. The guy who you introduced me to. Go ahead and introduce him.
We got today, guys. We're going to do a little segment on youth sports. So we brought for you an expert, an 8-time national champion, winning coach in youth football. Those got to get some applause for that 8-time national championship. Those around the country, you may not know them, but you should. The number one youth football program in the world, the Patriots. I can't remember what we're supposed to call them these days, but let me get you on.
The legendary Mr. Difusco. There we go.
Guys.
Really good, man. Thanks for coming on the show today. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, it's a great show. I watched all of them. They're great. You guys do a great job.
Thank you, sir. So, Doug, I met you. I think my son was in kindergarten. I was a sophomore, so my math isn't that great. But a long time ago, I met you, and I see this great program you have. Why don't you tell everybody, how you got into coaching youth football?
Wow, that was by accident, actually. I went to sign my son played the last year of Redskin football, and I went through a friend of mine who coached at Bolingbrook, actually. He signed up and told me about this Patriot program, and I went to sign my son up at the YMCA, and when I walked in to do it, a gentleman by the name of Mike Oliver said, "Hey, do you want to coach?" And I said, "Well, I was just coming to sign my son." And he goes, "No, how about being that?" Then it was considered the team, but there were no nationals for cadets in American youth football. And next thing you know, I said, "Well, I don't have a team. I just have a kid, one kid to sign up." And my son turned to me and said, "Give me 15 minutes." And I said, "What do you mean, give me 15 minutes? He goes, "Don't worry about it." And next thing I know, there were 22 kids at the YMCA, Fry YMCA on 95th Street. And believe it or not, 9 of those kids were the core team that went all the way through. They left the program and won the 3 back-to-back national titles, which was crazy. That is
awesome.
That's how it started.
That's awesome. What is your football background?
I was a basketball player, actually. My football background was that of I played youth football. I played into high school, stopped playing because you have to, as it is today, it was then, you really have to kind of concentrate on one thing. So I stopped playing after my sophomore year and just played basketball. And then next thing you know, when I got to Illinois, I started getting into coaching youth sports right away. And football was one of those I was always interested in. I never quite understood why it was such a slow-paced game. To me, it had to be like a fast break kind of game on turf. So that was kind of the whole philosophy behind it.
Yeah, you went to the mighty St. Bonaventure, if I'm not mistaken, right, to play basketball?
Yes, I did. I went to a very small Catholic school, the Bonnies, in the foothills of the Allegheny Mountains.
Okay.
So when you came here, was it the Patriots you joined right away, or was it a different team that became the Patriots? Explain kind of
Actually, the Patriots started in 2004. 2003, the Redskins were still around. The Naperville Redskins were the program in Naperville for many, many years, travel program. Bobby Napolitano, Jim Hess, Doug Fumagalli got involved in it. Mark Guido was involved in it. A number of, youth coaches. And then in 2005, really what happened was that the Redskins were deciding whether to stay alive or not to continue, and the Patriots were up and going, and that's the point that I basically became involved as president of the Patriots and took over the Patriots, and all the Redskins, they folded and came over with Dylan Warden and Les Warden and all the different kids and kids who were part of the Redskin program, as well as the Patriot program, kind of all combined at that time.
That's good. Now, you started out the cadet team, but, he mentioned cadets. To those of you who are not completely familiar, that's like 9 and 10-year-olds, if I remember right, cadets?
Correct.
Yep. Were you guys successful right away, or did you start coming out the gate with championships, or did you take some lumps in the beginning?
Actually, our very first year, we were a very good team, very talented team, and we ended up playing the Homewood Flossmoor team for the championship. Both teams were undefeated, and that was with Matt Domer, the young guy who played for Homewood Flossmoor and was to go to University of Illinois. That whole team, and ended up beating them in the championship, and then it ended for us. We were 10-0, and it stopped at that point because they didn't have it. And that year. The American Youth Football Championships were held in Tucson, Arizona, one of the only time that it was on the West Coast. And I went with Mike Oliver and actually Mark Guido's oldest son, Mike, Bobby Hirschberger, Pierre Steele, that whole group was their last year of Patriot football. So I helped with that staff, just went in and coached and went on the trip for that. And it kind of gave me the bug about nationals and AYF. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how it started.
Now, you have to entertain me, a novice to youth football. I unfortunately did not get to coach my son in youth football, so I started hanging around Reggie and another friend named Harvey, and that's when I was introduced to your program. And I started hearing names like national championships. Is it really a representative, or is representatively possible to name a 10 or 11-year-old football team the best in the country? I mean, in your playoff system, do you get to the point where, yeah, these kids are better than that one, this group is better than that? Is that actually possible?
Let me give you a little background how they do it, and it kind of answers the question. There's always going to be differing opinions, yes or no. The way American youth football has been derived and grown to is that there are age and weight based and unlimited based. At one time, American youth football was the only unlimited based programs that were in the country. So what they do is you play your local schedule, then a state championship, then a regional championship that combines 4 to 5 states, and then that representative of the regional championship then goes on to participate at the nationals. So you do have quite a mix of kids that get there. I'll give you a great example. The quarterback now for Oklahoma who'll be starting, who came out of the Scottsdale Firebirds. We were just looking the other night, a bunch of the kids were by the house, and they had the 2009 national title on, and it was Christian Kirk, who is the receiver now for the Arizona Cardinals, was playing for the Scottsdale Firebirds. You go through the old videos, and there's tremendous amount of NFL players that are in these videos. So to answer your question directly, it's the best representative or best representation of a national tournament playing down to it. There's always going to be debates about it, about arguments about it. But the one thing I will tell you is, from an unlimited youth football standpoint, Oliver, when you see 13 and 14-year-old kids that are the size of Reggie and yourself who can move and competing on the field down there, and you look around the field and you see Deshaun Jackson watching, and you see all these pros who have programs who are actually participating in it, it's pretty remarkable, actually. It's like a little mini NCAA tournament of youth football.
Yeah, I think it's a lot better now with unlimited to try to claim that, Oliver, as far as who's the best competed, because prior to that, when you had all these different competing leagues, they all had different things called, you'll hear the term weight matrix, right? This age, this weight, this age, this weight, and kids gravitate towards what best suits them where they're growing at the time. So with the age and weight matrix, it's impossible to really say you have a national champion truly. When it's unlimited weight, I think you get a lot closer to that answer. So speaking on that, what does it take for you, Doug, to build a championship team? I mean, in youth football, a lot of people say it's just for the kids, it's for fun, but a guy like yourself is constantly building a championship level team. What does it take to build that kind of squad? Is it luck? Is it who shows up?
Really, I'll speak to the team that you're most familiar with, that your son participated on. I mean, you're bringing together a tremendous group of kids who are great athletes. All are stars on their teams, and they all have to buy in. But more importantly, too, the kids are the easy buy-in. It's really the parents that need to buy into the situation, where they realize that it's all for one and one for all, and you need to share the football, and everyone works for a common goal. I mean, that was a remarkable group of parents and kids who all came together, and I think you saw it firsthand just with the sheer number of kids from that group who already have Power 5 and offers as freshmen and sophomores in high school. that's really kind of the magic behind it is the good parent group and a great bunch of kids that all work for a common goal and buy into it when you start to talk about it, because as you know, it's not done in May, June, July, August. This starts the minute National ends the year before on December 13th when you step off that plane. Right after Christmas or right during Christmas, the building and talking to parents about the next year's team begins. And you always have to tweak and modify because every year you go up a different level. The game changes dramatically. And I think you saw that. I mean, you saw the Chandler Bears. I mean, were they tiny at 14U or 13U?
No.
I mean, you were there personally. There were kids the size of Reggie walking around as 14-year-old linemen.
I can say it's amazing to see the size that kids can be and the concentration of talent to single teams. And you did one thing you said is the buy-in. You got to have buy-in and sacrifice. Again, I've never coached a national championship team, but just being around it and seeing it for myself, you got to have the buy-in of a lot of different people. And it's one of those things that's kind of hard to understand if you haven't had a kid to go through it, just to kind of see the differences. But it's intense, and yeah, you're right. I think that the recruitment is always happening. As soon as the game's over, you're thinking about next year, thinking about your staff and who you're going to have. So I highly suggest it to people who have kids.
And the kids have to have fun. I mean, if the kids aren't having fun and enjoying it and learning and developing, the kids you're not going to get the end result. We always, and Bobby's a big component, all of them were, but Bobby especially too. The whole thing was, if you develop the kids the right way and you have a good practice plan and the development takes place, the natural progression of winning takes care of itself. Just have kids have fun and learn and develop. Prepare them for the next level.
A question I have for both of you guys, and Reg, it's kind of funny that you're my friend, but we've never really talked about this at length. Is there any point where you see a young player coming down the pipeline that you know is going to be talented, but his parents are going to be a handful, and you're like, man, do I want to deal with this kid for the next 5 or 6 years? And then how honest are you to that point?
I'll let Doug start with that one.
I knew you were going to throw that one over the wall.
Doug has got a knack for dealing with those people. So let the expert talk.
Yes,
So-
you absolutely, Oliver, 100% hit the nail on the head. You do have that. Again, it's getting that parent to the point, and again, not all parents get to that point, Oliver. We have passed on kids who wanted to participate on the team because of that very reason, who were very, very talented kids, but it wasn't going to be a good fit with the rest of the parent group and the rest of the kids from everyone buying in. So it's addition by subtraction. You can't interject something that's going to be a cog in the wheel that breaks, and you get to a certain point and it causes confusion or chaos. That's not what we're attempting to accomplish. So you're right, but there's other parents who initially were in that boat or in that category you explained, yet once they saw the rest of the kids buy in and the parents buy in, they came along. Because the one thing I will tell you, and I think Reggie can testify to this, is that once they see the talent that their kid or the child gets involved in, they realize, wait a minute, he might not be the best of the best. Because practices are pretty remarkable with the amount of talent that's assembled, and you see the competition in these kids competing with one another. The chord kind of strikes as you get so much more out of the practices and that competition in competing nightly than you do in the games. Mm-hmm. The games are such a small part of the whole thing.
I'll say, to answer this for Doug, he's got a skill of keeping people happy enough that they're not going to go off the rails and passing balls around or whatever, and still finding a way to win. But what you said, anybody who's ever coached youth football, the worst part of youth football, unfortunately, is the parents. And I say this, all parents suck, including myself, right? When you love your kids so much, you think stuff, you have blinders on. In retrospect, you look and say, God, I can't believe I was like that. But most parents who don't suck just haven't sucked yet, or they haven't been in a situation, because they ruin a lot of these teams because my son's not getting the ball. They think you're developing your kid. And again, I'm not excluding myself, right? I'm saying when you're in that state of mind and you're loving your kid and you don't have the perspective of maybe an older child to realize that it's not as important as you think, you start to get in here and start thinking, wow, this coach is holding my son back from greatness. And they just get so consumed. Like, my son could be getting a scholarship at third grade right now if it wasn't for you. Somehow Doug will find a way to keep these people happy. And so, everyone has to make that sacrifice. And everyone has to say, if they want to win a championship, you might catch 1 or 2 balls a game. And every kid on our team that won the national championship in 18, every one of those kids was used to getting the ball most of the time on their team. And then they came here, and they might catch 1 or 2 balls. They might get 3 or 4 carries. And somehow they stayed happy enough, but that's what you had to do to win a championship. You had to make people buy in and sacrifice. So.
Well, I think that's a sign of a good manager in any industry, is keeping your general populace happy, which is a segue to the next question I have is, and this is more for Doug. Doug, how do you feel about putting together these super teams? And how do you feel about the regionalization? Like a couple of years ago, everybody got their panties in a bunch about the baseball team, the black youth baseball team from the South Side, and that this kid didn't live in this region, this kid didn't live in this region. Do you give a damn about that, or should just cream rise to the top?
Again, with American youth football, or with youth football, when you're in a Division I, which our program is a Division I program, there's no boundaries. So that's a little different than the baseball, that we didn't have a boundary that we had to deal with or to stay within. But to your point, it becomes again. You need to match the talent of the teams you're going to be participating in. And Reggie, having seen it firsthand many times, knows this. You're not so much competing with what you compete against locally. You're projecting what you're going to compete against that first week in December nationally. So, again, when you're competing against players who are ridiculously big, fast, quick, talented, great coaching staffs, the whole bit, you kind of have to forecast out that way. And that's really, and Reggie's been around it enough and heard me talk about it enough, that discussion with the kids and the parents when you're putting this together, you're projecting that to them. You're building that picture to them of what they're going to see. Because I will tell you, if you've never been there, when you walk in, especially our teams, when you walk in, and we used to walk into nationals, and we used to kid to people who hadn't seen it before. When we walked in to play and we started to come into the park, get checked in, and we started to walk to our field, the main programs nationally, the White Oak Warriors of the world, us, Watkins Hornets, et cetera, Chandler Bears, the Ducks, et cetera, talk stops. And I mean, it really gets silent. You see all the people turn and kind of look as you're walking to the field to play. And it's weird.
You already have the birth certificates in hand, huh?
Yeah.
Weird. And now they're doing state IDs.
Yeah. Yeah, now it's state IDs and everything else. So,
but Jay, you really have to go and look at these teams. You get to nationals, the teams don't have any weaknesses. Everybody has a youth basketball team or youth football team in the local area, and we're slow. We're big, but we don't have shooters, or we can run the ball, we can't throw the ball. At nationals, you can't have any of these butts. There's too many butts. You can't have too many butts, or you're not going to make any wins out there. You got to come with a team, and unfortunately, you can't do that with a boundary, right? There's not enough kids in one town, right? To just keep coming back with squad after squad after squad that's going to win and not have it. You got to go find a way to fill those holes.
Yes.
So your program, so the Patriots pretty much recruit themselves. Because I had the privilege of coaching one of your kids, a D-tackle kid, a Polynesian kid. He went to a Utah. He had long hair. You know what I'm talking about? Real good kid.
Devontae Dunn.
Yeah, and he was a football guy. And you could tell from birth, he loved the game of football. It wasn't these kids that you have to encourage to play. And that's one of the things I was like, man, if I could get 10 kids like that, I'd look like a world beater.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that you said, it kind of recruits itself. There was a dramatic change after we won the 2007 national title. We had kids coming from everywhere. Who wanted to play and be a part of it. We had kids from Bridgeport who were driving every night from Bridgeport to come to practice every night to play. That's a long commute to get there to Cavalry Church or Route 59 and 75th Street, basically, by 6 o'clock to start. And they didn't miss a practice.
Winning begets winning. So there you go.
Yeah.
Hey, so what direction do you see? We talked about how before it was age of 8 and unlimited. What kind of trends do you see in youth football? What direction do you see it going in?
I think age-based, or what they call unlimited, is really growing dramatically compared to age and weight. Age and weight is starting to decrease. It's becoming tougher and tougher to find leagues that have age and weight based that are filled across the platforms with all the different ages and weights. It's a lot easier when you have grade based, where all the fifth graders play together, all the sixth graders play together, all the seventh graders. The other thing too is, and you know this, is that you're now really developing kids in the positions they're going to be. You're taking you're not taking a 14-year-old or 13-year-old 135-pound kid and sticking his hand on the ground and saying you're going to be a guard or a tackle. He'll never be a guard or a tackle in the high school level. Whereas you'll have these big kids, and you know this because you saw them from when you had TJ and all those guys when they were little. You have linemen who are very big kids who are being developed as linemen. You have kids who are skill position kids being developed as skill position kids. Now, yes, some may grow, some may not grow. But when you have a child who is, and I'll give you an example, when you have a child who is 5'10", 240 pounds, and he's 11 years old, he's going to be a lineman. He's going to keep growing, especially when you look at Dad, and Dad's a 6'5", 6'6" guy.
Unless your name was Jerome Bettis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you are going to have those. And again, you will have those anomalies that develop along the way.
Right.
But that's good.
Yeah.
But it's more real football than it is older lighters everywhere with smaller kids who will never be linemen putting their hands on the ground or putting their hands as a 1-tech or a 3-tech.
I have to ask this question from a personal standpoint, because I was a kid who wasn't allowed to play because I was always way bigger than my age.
Yeah.
And so my parents looked at the difference, my mother, and was like, nah, he's a big kid, but he should be running around out there with high school kids. How do you personally feel about that, being a football guy? As far as he's a big kid, he should be allowed to play. And obviously I don't have skin in the game from a youth standpoint, but I think an 11-year-old should be allowed to play with an 11-year-old. That's just me. How do you feel?
I agree, and that's one of the things that changed the game dramatically of youth sports and is unlimited football, or what we call grade-based football. 11-year-olds are playing with 11-year-olds. 12-year-olds are playing with 12-year-olds. 13 are playing with 13. Before, with age and weight-based, you would have a big 10-year-old who is forced to play with 13 and 14-year-olds. Well, what happens? They physically and mentally, even if they're huge, mentally they're not ready. They're just not ready to participate in that world, and they get discouraged, and a lot of kids from that time frame never came back to play again. The discouragement outweighed the benefit or the joy that they had for participating, so they just quit and never came back.
Right.
That's what I think has been a great benefit of this age-based football.
I agree 100% with you on that, Doug. I think that, like Oliver, to your point, you're saying they were stuck you with 14-year-olds when you were 10 years old. You're a tough guy, so you might have cream would have rose to the top, and then someone said, look at Oliver Gibson. He played with the older guys and went on. But there's another guy behind you that maybe wasn't really mature. He gets so punked and so bullied, and you're not getting better, right? So you just get ruined. Those guys go down. They become, people tell them that they're soft. They don't want to play anymore. Then you have all these other guys who think that they're the older lighters that are playing football. They think that they're power players when they're not big. They're playing a grade below them. So now they think that I can run between the tackles. And then they get to high school, and they realize between the tackles, Oliver Gibson is there. And all of a sudden you say hello to him, and you're finally playing somebody your age, and you kill him. So I think it ruins a lot of people. Doug, what do you think about the safety? Do you think it's safer in general, unlimited football, or do you think the way it's going to go with the way it was before was safer?
I think it's safer unlimited football. Statistics indicate that from an injury standpoint. And the only reason is then again you have the big kids really banging on the big kids, and again we've had. I'll just speak for that 2018 team. I mean, our tackles were 310, or our guards were 310 and 265, 275.
Wow!
I mean,
eighth grade guys, eighth grade people.
But they're playing against kids that same size and that same thing. But again, their speed is not where they're going to run down Reggie Jr. or they're going to run down a Tyler Morris or Antonio Torres or Terrion Roundy. I mean, they're just not going to get there.
Right.
And it's very similar to what you see in high school and college. The linebackers are making the plays, the safeties are making the plays, and the tackles are tying up bodies, and it's much more. I just feel it pairs kids of equal size and equal physical ability more together than it does with age and weight.
To that point, I agree, but I also want to say this: you also may lose a couple of guys. Because I almost did not play football because I wasn't allowed to play until I got of age and weight. And so I was playing basketball. Like, man, I'll just ride this basketball thing out since they're telling me that I'm the fat kid. You know what I mean? So it does happen. I think you could lose some kids, and I was a pretty damn good linebacker. So I'm glad that didn't happen.
And that's the reason why we've seen such an influx at the younger levels for grade-based or unlimited football. Exactly what you said, because you'd have these big kids, and traditionally parents are very concerned about their big child hurting a smaller child. That's one of the things I think Reggie will point out. We've gotten some big kids, and we're like, you're allowed to be physical in this game. Go ahead, be physical. And they're almost hesitant at first as they're learning the game because they don't want to hurt anybody. And then when they realize they're playing against, like you said, they're playing against kids their equal size at the positions they're competing with on the opposite side of the line, they start to come out of that shell, develop, and learn that they can become, who they want to be.
Mm-hmm. Reg, it's funny, ironic that you said that because Reggie actually made that point the other day. He was talking about why big kids are soft sometimes. Because you spend your whole life tiptoeing around kids. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you're too big to play that rough. Well, that does happen.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. You mentioned Devontae. When we first got Devontae done, and Bob came up to me after practice number 1 and said, he doesn't want to really hit anybody. And I said, well, look at the size of him. I'm sure he was a little hesitant. He was a grown man as a 13-year-old. I mean, this was a big, physical, developed young man as a 13-year-old. And then as time went on, as he participated in practices with Danny Dominiak and some of our other bigger kids that we had, all of a sudden the switch went on. That he said, I'm not going to hurt anybody. I can become who I am, more physical. And the minute they realize that, they come out of their shell. And that's the emotional part of the game that I think is so important, too, that Reggie pointed out. You don't want kids to get discouraged. You kind of want to nurture them and encourage them to be who they are and find their own path in the game, because then they'll be happy and they'll continue to progress through and go to the next level and the next level.
What do you think about the rule changes making things safer? Do you think that they should put an age limit or, I guess, minimum on football before kids can start getting hit? How do you see that direction with the whole concussion thing? Conversation that's been going around?
It's interesting. I think you're always going to have two sides to the argument. The one thing I don't think people really realize, you guys do because of your age group and where you participated at, the equipment protection level is so dramatically different today than even when you guys played in college at Notre Dame. I mean, if you look at the inside of your helmets, what you played at Notre Dame, and you look at the helmets today and the inside of the helmets today, it's like today's helmets were dropped in from another planet, if you go back and look. I know, you had the air, yeah, exactly.
And I guarantee none of those pads got replaced once in 4 years of college. They just painted it with gold. The grooves, show them the grooves. They don't even fill in the grooves. Like, they even fill the grooves in on sport.
Tell me those helmets. Yeah, I know. And then tell me those helmets when the temperature dropped to a certain level, those pads felt like 2x4s on the inside of the helmet hitting your head.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, how many quarters do you think it would take you to get that helmet out of a gumball machine in today's day? I mean, it's really not. It's crazy how we even survive. But
And I think that's one of the things to answer your question directly. When you have 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds participating in the equipment technology today, they are so padded and so protected, and they don't generate any force whatsoever to create anything that could be detrimental to them physically. They just don't. I mean, it's like an electric football game watching it. I think where it begins to get really where you start to see the impact generation change at 12U level. Now you start to see those kids just before puberty or just getting into puberty really start to generate some power and some speed. And that's where you really have to keep your eye on, fundamentally you have to be very safe in how you do your drill work, how much impact you have during the week, et cetera, following the appropriate guidelines. But I think equipment-wise has changed the game dramatically.
Yeah, that's good.
Dramatically from a safety.
We want to save the sport, so I'm glad to see that. I think that also people are coaching out some of the stuff that's more dangerous.
Yep.
I mean, one of the big lines when Oliver and I played was butt him in the mouth, knock him in the dirt. So we were, trade an 8-yard out for a headache. Everything was about hitting somebody in the head and banging someone in the head. That was what we were taught.
Ear hole them.
Yeah, ear hole somebody. I mean, everything was helmet to helmet to helmet. It was encouraged. Yeah. Now, bull in the ring, right? You play bull in the ring. You butt heads and just get everything going. Now it's like if someone does targeting, the whole stadium jumps up and screams, "Targeting! Oh my God, you hit him so hard!" But it's like it's getting. I talked about on another show, like if horse collaring was illegal when I played, I would have never made it on the high school team because that's how I tackled everybody. I couldn't catch you little squirrely guys, so I just grabbed you by the shoulder pads. Nowadays, you horse collar somebody, it was like face mask when we grew up. So I think the game is getting faster and more skilled, but it's definitely getting softer. But hey, if people are walking around slurring and drooling on themselves and they're older, and we can prevent that, and still entertain people, I think that it's a great sport either way.
And I think it had to change, though, because athletes are getting bigger. I'll give you an example, Oliver. Our offensive line in 2018 was bigger, height-wise and pound for pound, than the same varsity St. Francis offensive line that year. I mean, so kids have grown and changed development-wise remarkably in the course of, even in the last 10 years, it's changed dramatically. So,
right.
I think the teaching techniques and the safety and the equipment have to continue to stay ahead of it.
Absolutely.
What about, in your opinion, what I like to call the weaponizing of athletes now? I mean, kids are being trained. We used bad form back in the day. I used a forearm shiver. Using a forearm shiver is not really going to hurt somebody. It'll probably hurt the shiverer more than the person I'm trying to deliver it to. Whereas now, kids know how to tackle now, which makes the game overall safer. A Seahawk tackle, I've been doing that. I didn't even know what it was, but that's what we were doing. But I think coaches are more educated, and that's helping a lot of the issues. Basketball is speeding up. Football is speeding up, but it's not the kind of reckless abandonment where you just throw your head in there and then hope for the best.
And again, you're absolutely correct. I think the techniques had to be changed to have the game survive. But the game's changed dramatically from a standpoint, too, of the tempo of the game, which really, again, has changed the game dramatically. People used to laugh at our teams back in 2005, 6, 7. We had kids with the whole team had wristbands on, and we never huddled. I mean, it was how many plays can we run in a half? Right. I want to snap the ball every 10 as fast as we possibly can go. And opposing coaches used to look at us like we were from another plane, like, what are they doing? And we never used to huddle back then. I mean, kids ran from wristbands all the way back then as fast as we could. Thank God I had a very good I had a very smart quarterback for 4 years in a row, Dylan Gross, who ran the whole thing and knew exactly what was going on. And that was a huge part of it. But again,
also, to your point, to a different style of football.
Yep.
Because not too long ago, I was watching a football game, one of our old Notre Dame games from 89, and it was just power, lead, draw, power, lead, draw, ISO. It's more basketball now than it is football.
And that was kind of the vision that I said at the beginning when I started to coach in this. I looked at it as a basketball game. I want to spread you all the way across the field, and I want to put as many fast kids as I possibly can out there, and I want to go as fast as I can, because my whole philosophy was, and thought process today still is that if a play clock now in high school and nationally is 45 seconds from the time they spot the ball, irregardless, the minute the ball goes dead, they wind the 45 clock. If I can snap the ball from the time they spot it in 10 seconds, I'm adding, let's say, 20 seconds every offensive snap I have. For every 5 snaps, I'm adding a minute to the game, and the defense can't stop that. They can't change it.
Well, you might have given away one of your trade secrets there, but
he's retired now. He's retired now. He's not doing it anymore.
So if I have 50 snaps in a youth game, and I'm adding a minute to every possession, I'm adding a full 2 quarters to the game in a youth game. That becomes a problem, to the other team. They're not used to that many snaps. and it tires you out, it becomes a problem. Because in youth, you have kids playing both sides of the ball a lot of times. Same in high school, you still do have kids play both sides.
Awesome.
So, Doug, now that you've hung up your youth whistle, I know you've got a high school whistle now. What would you say to a young coach that might be listening today with a 8-year-old team or 9-year-old team on kind of how to build a championship or just how to go about his business?
Be organized, have a game plan, have practice plans that are prepared ahead of time. Make sure the kids are having fun and make the practices very high tempo. I mean, always going from one drill to the next drill to the next drill to the next drill. Not a lot of downtime. Kids have even high school kids, even college kids for that matter, because I've been at college practice, have a very short attention span. If you don't engage them and continue to engage them, the minute you lose them and it kind of wanders, it's tough to reel them back in. I'm sure you guys had college practices at Notre Dame where all of a sudden you're thinking at practice, what am I doing here? This practice is
I'm
awful.
looking at the dome. I'm looking at trees and birds. Yeah.
But, hey, no one cared about us being engaged. This is a different generation. No one cared about your feelings and your interest level. You just do it,
That's changed too.
That's changed a
but
lot.
it's true. It's tough to reel. I mean, Oliver, you just did high school football. When you lose them, it's tough to reel them back in. I mean, you spend an inordinate amount of energy, time, and effort trying to refocus them the minute you lose them.
We've had entire practices ruined because a squirrel ran across the field.
No.
And it took 5 minutes to get them reeled back in. So,
I tell you, funny story. I was coaching these kids, and I'm too intense. I think my son's probably first grade, and I'm trying to get these kids to hit, and I'm trying to get them intense. And I'm like, oh, and coach, one of the kids said, "Hey, look, coach, a rainbow." I said, now it brings you back down to earth and lets you realize, okay, man, maybe I should tone it down a little bit. Let's everybody look at the rainbow. Everyone look at the rainbow.
Hey, the other thing too, and I think Reggie knows this from being around youth football, a real important thing is having a good staff. I mean, you got to have a very good staff who knows the game, who can teach the game, and who are really good communicators. I think that's so important that they're able to communicate and break it down so no matter what level you're coaching, those kids can grasp and understand. Your audience, and those kids can understand what you're trying to teach them. And you're making it so they're getting something out of it, that your game plans or your practice plans aren't above their heads where it looks great on paper and you get done with it and you go, they didn't learn anything. I was way out over my skis with these guys. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important. And I know, I watched Reggie. I mean, did you have Emmett? Emmett was part of your group too, right?
My man Emmett would drive out. He had 3 or 4 kids at home. He would drive out an hour, a couple days a week and help me coach. That was unbelievable.
I mean, you had Emmett, you had Casper. I mean, you had Tika. I mean, look at your group of coaches. That's a great example. You had guys who knew what they were doing, who could communicate to the kids. So those kids got a lot out of it. That's important too, I think.
One year I had Casper, who played in the NFL for 8 years. I had Jabbar Robinson, who was a Buckus finalist. Yeah. I had Tikas Pettigrew, who played football and basketball in college. I'm like, and this is all for like a bunch of 8 and 9-year-olds. So I'm like, we were blessed, definitely blessed to have good coaches. So
that's a big part of it. And that translates to the kids' development and also the kids enjoying the game.
Absolutely.
I mean, how many kids did you have come back year after year after year because of the way your staff treated those kids, taught those kids, engaged those kids, and kind of nurtured them for the next year?
Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
Them.
Yeah, that's good.
All of my kids came back because we weren't winning. So we actually had good relationships, and that does make them, I could not be a certain type of coach because when you're not putting the wins on the board, man, I got to come out here Thursday and Friday and get skull drug on Saturday. Not going to do it, so. You're right about that.
In Oliver's defense, though, I don't think Belichick could win at Romeoville High School. I just to be fair.
Hey, take it easy. That's still my high
school. That's still your high school, but things have changed over there a little bit, man. That big guy.
And that's knowing your audience and the kids and being able to, teach those kids. I mean, it's a tough one. It's tough. I mean, and again, there are certain areas that are basketball areas. There are certain areas that are soccer areas, et cetera, that they may excel at one sport and not at the other. That doesn't diminish the effort and the game planning and all the time. And a lot of those kids got a lot out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when you guys came out to play 7-on-7. A lot of your kids, they were all engaged from the time you were there to the time they left. I mean, and the effort was tremendous. That's a testament to you.
One of the kind of controversial subjects that Reg and I always throw around, because in this age you have to be careful. You have to be careful of race. Is kind of kid. Do you believe that there's a certain type of kid that helps develop a certain type of football player? Like Reggie calls them plumbers. You need some plumbers or some plumbers' kids. Yeah. A certain mentality, or do you feel like, hey, if you're a good coach, you can win with whatever is in the program?
I think it's when you specifically speak to that question, it's about passion. Do they have a heart for the game? Do they want to be there? Do they want to learn? Do they want to get better? Right then and there, it doesn't matter what type of player it is. You could have a child, Casper used to say it all the time, you could have a kid with great talent who didn't want to work, and you could have a child who was a developmental kid who wanted to work. At the end of the day, you're going to get more out of that young man who wants to work than the superstar who doesn't care about working. So it's about passion, I think. But yeah, you're always going to have the blue collar kind of in the lunch pail kids who come, who don't say two words, who get to practice, put down their water bottle, and let's get after it. Mm-hmm. You can see that coming a mile away. We had a number of those kids. We had kids on our team 2018. I don't think they said 10 words all year during a practice. Right. But when the whistle blew and it was time to work, they worked and worked and worked and worked. And at the end of practice, when they took their pads off, they'd screw around with the rest of the kids and leave. Same at the high school level. You have kids who come in who may not have the greatest physical talent, but the passion and the drive and the want to get better is unbelievable. And you need those kids, because other kids, the superstars, kind of look at them and go, wait a minute, look at how much effort they're giving. If I want to be the leader of this team, I got to step up or I look like I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I think in football, the most beautiful part about our game is that, especially you think about a time like this in our country where we can be divided, it's a time for everyone to come together. All walks of life are needed on the football team. The blue collar kid, the gritty kid. You just, I don't want to go down each group, but you take all kinds and there's room for them on that football field. You need people who are linemen. They're different than running backs. They're different than receivers. They're different than defensive people and linebackers. And I just love that about the sport. But you kind of have to have that mix of a group. Otherwise you got all fast kids. You got all big, slow, strong kids. You need both of them. Yep. So that's it. So.
Yeah. And the time you see that come together, and I know you guys have seen this because you've been around the field, is when a big play happens and it's a change of possession. It's not just one kid who congratulates people. It's really that moment in the game where that whole team comes over to that kid. And you see that. That's really the only time in a football game at a youth or a high school level is at a change of possession where that clock stops, where they all come over to congratulate that kid. Mm-hmm. And that's that environment you're talking about, Reg, where everyone comes together.
I always call football the Statue of Liberty of sports. Give us your fat kids, give us your small kids, your popular kids. There's a job somewhere in football.
There is, for sure. So
my favorite thing was, and the linemen wanted to get to the slaughter roll as quickly as possible, because the linemen then would line up on the sideline and say, okay, my time to carry the ball.
Sure.
My time to carry. Let me carry the ball.
So
that was still, to this day, one of the funniest